honourable member for Peterborough-Kawartha.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Has the government forgotten who we work for? Let me remind everyone, we work for the people. No one can deny that Canadians are frustrated. The events that have transpired over the last week prove this. Unfortunately, what started out as a respectful and peaceful protest turned into acts that do not reflect true Canadians. I agree with all of my members in this House and watching that the use of symbols of hate and defacing of public monuments are criminal offences, and these individuals should be charged. There is no room for hate. Canada's prosperity and middle class depend on preserving and expanding open rules-based trade and ensuring our supply chains are strong and resilient. This is a quote taken directly from the speech from the throne. Canadians can take no comfort from empty promises. It has been 2 years now since the start of the pandemic, and Canadians want things to open up for our jobs, for the supply chain, for our mental health, and for honest dialogue between government and the people. This we can see from this week's events when thousands of Canadians have come to the nation's capital to be heard, and our Prime Minister has still not addressed their concerns. Listen to the diverse voices who speak a multitude of languages and who shape this country. This is the words of our Governor-General. Beautiful words. But Canadians are sick of words that our government has failed to act on. They want honesty, transparency, and they want leadership. Since the throne speech, I've heard the same stories throughout my riding, with the main one being over 29 million Canadians have done what they were asked of in order to live their lives, myself included. But every time Canadians do what is asked of them, the promise of what they will get in return is changed. The goalposts constantly move. Olivia is a 19-year-old hardworking student who struggles with the division that has ballooned in the past couple of years. The pent-up feelings of isolation have had a profound effect on her. This pandemic has magnified many long-brewing issues in our country, the biggest one being our mental health crisis. We need each other to move forward. We need a leader to acknowledge that each voice is important. Healthcare workers have exhausted their resources and mental health during this pandemic because the root cause of this issue still has not been addressed. Where in the speech from the throne does it acknowledge our lack of resources for our healthcare system? The reality is it all comes from the top. And until our government recognizes that we need to increase health transfers to our provinces and territories to give them the resources necessary to protect Canadians, we will keep having Groundhog Day. I have voicemails and emails from exhausted healthcare workers who feel like they have not been heard or acknowledged. The fact that they still do not have adequate forms of PPE and testing 2 years in is a disgraceful treatment of the people we call heroes. The reality is, until we have a healthcare system that can manage patient load of the variants and still provide life-saving surgeries and tests, we will never get out of this. As we move forward on the economy of the future, no worker or region will be left behind. I want to address this quote from the throne speech. Since being named Shadow Minister for Tourism, I have been meeting with key stakeholders in the industry who have all said the same thing. Lift the travel restrictions and open up Canada for business. Why has the government left the tourism industry behind when it contributes to a significant portion of our economy? First-time home buyers are also being left behind by this government. Peter and Julie are a young couple from my riding. They are 26 and 24. They both have well-paying jobs, one in engineering and one in the trades. Peter and Julie want to buy a home. They've been searching for months. One house came on the market listed at $499,000. In 8 days, there were 53 offers and the house sold for $802,000. If our next generation cannot afford housing, that is a serious issue. and it certainly doesn't feel like no worker will be left behind. Our government is leaving a whole generation behind. From the time we are born, we are taught to listen to the people in charge. We are taught to follow rules. But what happens when the person in charge doesn't listen to the people? One thing many constituents have said to me is, don't just criticize, offer solutions. I'm imploring our Prime Minister to acknowledge all Canadians, and I'm imploring Canadians to listen. Even if you disagree, listen, be respectful and tolerant of each other. That is the solution to build trust. A reputation isn't built on saying what you will do, it is built on what you actually do. Yeah. Another quote from the speech from the throne, we will always stand up for a brighter future for all. Who is all? Because the government has left too many behind. We need a new government. We need to act on our words. I have been a voter a lot longer than I've been a politician, and I know how people feel. And I hear the words, and I believe our members all feel the same way. We all want out of this. But we have to address what's going on. We have to have honest dialogue. And we have to acknowledge a question, and we have to look at this question. How did we get to a point where thousands of people drove thousands of miles to have their voice heard? We need to ask how we got here. In the conclusion of the speech from the throne, it states the decade is still young. With compassion, courage, and determination, we have the power to make it better than how it started. But that only happens by standing together. What is standing together? Standing together should be truly having the backs of Canadians. It should be working together and listening to each other. It should be about opening up our economy so we can get back to work. This economic crisis is a mental health crisis. This government has failed Canadians throughout this pandemic because it has forgotten that we work for the people.